Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Krakue. Esther, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of George Clooney there? Firstly, saying it was a mistake to have Kamala Harris running, but also claiming that Hunter Biden is a lie. Well, of course he is. We all know that. So is his dad. But he wouldn't criticise Hunter Biden any further than what he already did because that's not helpful to the Democrats. I mean, thank you, George Clooney. What's your assessment of all of that?
Well, I'd like to transport us to a parallel universe where anyone cares what George Clooney thinks about anything really. This man who's literally paid to play pretend. The level of narcissism you see among celebrities like this is almost radioactive. It could fill out the whole state of Kentucky because these are not endocrinologists or oncologists or astronauts. They're people that literally get paid a fortune, an arm and a leg to play pretend. But let's do what he does and act like he's a kingmaker. Do you recall his op-ed that he wrote in the New York Times before the election, urging Joe Biden to step down? And then when he did, a couple of weeks later, he said that this was the biggest sacrifice that's been done to for the country since George Washington. So this was the kind of flowery language that he was using to describe basically Joe Biden doing what he wanted. And now, a year later, he's whinging because the Democrats didn't go as far to give him everything he wanted by primarying a candidate as useless as Kamala Harris, which just screams of a level of arrogance that you just wouldn't believe. But I think one thing that Hunter Biden got right, which is not a phrase I thought I would ever utter in my life, was why should we care what he thinks? Who is George Clooney? Who is this man that thinks that he can throw money about and give his opinion about who should have been primaried or who should have been made the Democratic nominee? As if this is not a country of 340 million people who live vastly different lives to the very gilded cages that these celebrities live in, who don't have net worths that rival that of small countries, who have to live with the consequences of voting for people that these individuals endorse. So in one way, it's interesting to see kind of this Hunter George Clooney spat and George Clooney kind of feigning the esteemed royal that's going to look down on a subject and not even dignify his expletive response to him with a reply. But on the other hand, it just shows the level of narcissism that we see in the Hollywood ranks. And you even see it now with President Obama, who for a long time fancied himself as sort of the kingmaker in the Democratic Party. He's calling Donnie, saying, I can be your sounding board, before the last election, telling black guys not to vote for Donald Trump because you're basically giving up on yourselves and using all sorts of language that would suggest that they're basically self-hating. I don't even want to go into that. But you have these narcissistic characters in the Democratic Party that are not focused on getting new blood, getting actual talent in the Democratic Party, getting rid of these octogenarians and actually focusing on the issues that people are concerned about, like the economy, like the cost of living, like jettisoning the woke nonsense. You have these people that are just kind of leading a dynastic form of politics that just don't get it.
You're exactly right. I mean, the level of narcissism is astronomical. Esther, I also want to get your thoughts on what's been revealed today, that the BBC doctored Donald Trump's January 6th speech to make it appear as though he was encouraging his supporters to riot in the Capitol. Now, a leaked 19-page dossier, which was shared with The Telegraph by a whistleblower, revealed that a Panorama program broadcast a week before the election last year completely misled viewers by mangling footage. Look at this.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So Panorama, which broadcast its Trump a Second Chance program on October 28 last year, also showed flag-waving men marching on the Capitol directly after Donald Trump spoke. And the dossier found that by mangling footage from the start of Trump's speech with a segment from nearly an hour later, Panorama had made Trump say things he never actually said to make it appear as though he was encouraging riots. Now, this has led to the resignation of one controller at BBC. Donald Trump Jr. has posted about this, blasting the BBC, calling it fake news, saying that the fake news reporters in the UK are just as dishonest as the ones here in America. Esther, it's absolutely shocking, but it doesn't surprise me. Can I get your reaction?
It doesn't surprise me at all. And as we speak, in the next few weeks, I'm going to have another quarterly payment come out of my bank account for the BBC license fee, which I am obligated to pay, unfortunately. But this is the stuff of basically this is the kind of stuff that has basically tanked the BBC's reputation. Now, the fact that this dossier, this 19-page dossier, was actually made known to the BBC's own ethics and standards watchdog, which is comprised of Tim Davie, who basically runs the BBC, and yet nothing was done about it. It just goes to show the level of institutional rots that we're looking at and the culture of bias that has been allowed to take root in the BBC. Now, if you know anything about how the BBC functions, and if you know more broadly about journalism in the UK, you know the kinds of people that can afford to even get a BBC internship tend to be from kind of plush neighborhoods, from very good schools in and around London. They and their families tend to have a certain political ilk or leaning. And this kind of ideology, this kind of cushy luxury belief class of the left-wing metropolitan elite has basically filtered its way through the BBC ranks, so much so that if you talk to people that do BBC shows in the UK, panel shows, debate shows and all of that, and when they get a call from a producer basically asking them their thoughts on the topic, you probably come away knowing the thoughts of the producer as well, and is probably not going to be agreeing with you if it in any way leans away from the anti-Brexit, anti-Farage, anti-conservative point of view. So this is unsurprising. I mean, we've seen so many gaffes from the BBC over the years. The fact that they refuse to call Hamas a terrorist group, even though they are a designated terrorist group in the UK by the British government, which is just completely astonishing. The documentary that BBC Panorama did about how to survive a war zone in Gaza, when they found out that the narrator was a Hamas official's son. All these sorts of things that have come out from the BBC that have been poorly handled. You know, the Hugh Edwards scandal, which was probably one of the most disgraceful things that's happened to the BBC. The fact that they let this man who was soliciting child pornography just keep his job at the BBC, and in obvious fashion with the rest of our judicial system, he basically got a slap on the wrist and a few months of a suspended sentence, which is just disgusting. But these are the kinds of things that have been coming out of the BBC that doesn't surprise anyone. I suspect there's going to be a bit of panic in Westminster because the BBC's Royal Charter is up in 2027. And we know that Lisa Nandy, the minister who heads up these sorts of affairs, has said that nothing is off the table. You have people that are seeing their license fees go up and are wondering, why am I paying this? I don't even watch the BBC. Their own watchdog can't even keep them in check. The fact that this was submitted to their own watchdog and nothing happened, and this was allowed to circulate, it's vile. And in the case of this Donald Trump video, I mean, the fact that it was completely misleading is linked to the fact that he wasn't even facing federal charges for actually inciting violence, because it clearly wasn't true. They took a clip that was two clips 15 minutes apart in this man's speech and tried to make it look like he directly incited violence on January the 6th, which doesn't really get much lower than that, if you ask me.
No, it certainly doesn't. The TDS is just on another level.